Welcome to Pushing Beyond the Obvious, and I am your host Mukesh Gupta, author of the world's first business poem, Your Startup Mentor. This is a show where I bring you ideas and insights from some of the best minds in the world so that you can be a better entrepreneur and grow your business. Today's episode of Pushing Beyond the Obvious is brought to you by Skillshare, an online learning platform with over 18,000 plus classes on business, marketing, technology, and many more. Get 2 months of Skillshare for free at rmukeshgupta.com/learn. One of the courses that I recommend to every entrepreneur to learn from is the one taught by Simon Sinek. He teaches a class on presentation essentials and is so very good. While you're there, you could also try out the class that I teach, which is on how to rock your next brainstorming session. You can find my class at rmukeshgupta.com/brainstorm and get 2 months of Skillshare for free at rmukeshgupta.com/learn. Hi Dorie, thanks for taking time and talking to us today.
Hi Mukesh, glad to be talking with you.
So before we kind of move, can I ask you to introduce yourself and the body of work that you have done?
Sure. So I'm an author. I've written 3 books. The first was Reinventing You, which is about professional reinvention and how to shift into the job or the career that you want. My second was Stand Out, which is about how to become a recognized expert in your field. And my latest book is called Entrepreneurial You, which is about how to think more entrepreneurially, how to develop multiple income streams in your business. If you're an employee, how to create a side hustle. And if you're an entrepreneur, how to really maximize that and get into new lines of business that can help you maximize your revenue.
So all the 3 books seems to be following a pattern of how do you stand out and thereby create a side hustle or a brand for yourself. How do you think in a way which again creates kind of a brand for yourself and allows you to create multiple income opportunities. So is that a conscious choice that you've had, or is that something that has emerged out of whatever you have been going through in your life or seen people going through in their lives around you?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you see the through line because yes, it is intended. Although when I first started writing my books, I didn't necessarily have the longer term plan. I describe the books now as a trilogy, but it wasn't necessarily that I had planned 3 books out. I am really good at being strategic, like maybe a year out. I'm kind of bad at being strategic 5 years out. But I just kept doing the next thing that was interesting to me, or the thing that was relevant, the problem that I wanted to solve in my own life or my own career, the thing I wanted to figure out. And so it really was a progression in the sense of, how do you get to the zone that you want to be in? How do you excel in that zone? And then, okay, well, how do you make money in that zone? So I think it does fit pretty well together, but the truth is it was kind of one thing at a time.
So let's talk about your latest book, which is Entrepreneurial You. So where did the thought or the seed for the book arise, and what did you learn in the course of writing the book, which you thought was something which which changed in your mind? So I am writing my book as well, and you start off with something in your mind as to this is what we are going to write. Then you go out and do research, go talk to people, and then there is something that you realize that okay, what I originally started out with, not everything is as we originally thought out. Something changes. The entire process of writing the book changes something inside of you. Is there something like that which happened to you when you wrote this book?
Well, one of, I guess, sort of the origin stories of writing Entrepreneurial You was I had this experience about 3 years ago where I was corresponding with a friend of mine, a guy named John Corcoran, and I tell this story in the opening of the book. And I had just come back from this teaching engagement in Asia, and it was great. It was very lucrative. It was a fun experience, but it was hard work. I was teaching like 6 hours a day at this business school, and it was exhausting. I had a cold while I was doing it, so there was kind of a certain level of misery involved in doing it, even though it was a nice assignment. And so I was corresponding with my friend John, And basically what I discovered was that the amount of money that I had made in this 2-week period, again, a good amount of money, but I worked very hard for it. He made the same amount of money that month just from like sending some emails. And I'm like, wait a minute, how did that happen? What am I doing wrong here? And so it got me interested in understanding a little bit more about online marketing and affiliate marketing and things like that, which I had always eschewed because, especially in the early days, there was a little bit of a taint of people who were diving in on this, and it just seemed like they were all kind of scammers and Viagra salesmen and things like that. And I was just like, I don't want to do this like trashy thing. But what I came to realize was that, of course, once you think about it, any channel is a value neutral channel. It's just a question of how you use it. It can be used for good or it can be used for ill. And so I wanted to learn more and explore more about ways that people who are, ethical, intelligent professionals that are actually trying to do something meaningful rather than something trashy, ways that they could leverage the internet appropriately to build out their business and create new income streams, which I think a lot of people haven't, even 10, 20 years into the cultural rise of the internet, a lot of people haven't necessarily adapted their own business model to that. And so I think there's a lot of untapped opportunity.
Interesting. So tell me something. There is this dichotomy that I see. On one side, almost everyone who talks about investing talks about the importance of having multiple sources, having a widely spread portfolio. And on the other hand, we have people like Cal Newport who say, okay, you focus on one thing. Then there is this book which talks about how focusing on one thing and only one thing is probably the way to go and to grow and go all in. And there is this, I see people doing well with either approach. So is there something which tells us, okay, when is it a good time to go diversify your income streams and diversify your interests and passions, and and when it is time to go deep into one area and explore that and become and own the category, as they say?
Yeah, I think that's a really smart point, Mukesh, and you're right. In many ways, I want to split the difference here, because I think that there's value to both pieces. And let me sort of explain what I'm talking about. So when I talk about multiple streams of income, what I am really talking about is within the context of your professional sphere. So if how we make money, how we get money coming in. So in terms of like, once I have money, there's plenty of things I do with it. I put it in stocks or real estate or whatever. But, and I think diversification is useful there. But in terms of how I'm actually bringing in money, I am not advocating for people to do wildly different things. I'm not saying be a tennis instructor, run a dog breeding operation, be an English tutor. These all have different audiences. They can't capitalize on each other. What I am suggesting is that most people have just a little bit too simplistic of a business model sometimes, where they have a thing that they do. Oh, well, I do social media plans for companies. That's it. And that's great. And if you are an entrepreneur, presumably you have a number of different clients, so there is some degree of diversification, but you are almost certainly leaving money on the table and also having a little bit of risk, because, all right, let's say that a new market entrant comes in. Let's say that all of a sudden companies say, what, we don't need social media plans, or they all decide to hire people in-house, whatever. What I am suggesting is that there are oftentimes synergies that can happen when you have the same audience, and you can essentially sell them different things or in different formats that don't require that much extra effort, and in fact can enhance each other exponentially. So in my case, I now have when I wrote Entrepreneurial You, I had 7 income streams. I'm now up to 9, and the things that I do, just so people can get a sense, I do marketing strategy consulting, which is kind of the original thing that I did in my business, executive coaching, writing books, business school teaching, giving speeches, affiliate income, online courses, live in-person workshops and events, and mastermind groups. So there's 9 there, and they feed into each other, right? Because the same person that buys a book of mine, that might be the $20 entry point. But if they really like it, they might say, "Oh, I want to join your course. I want to join your mastermind. I want to get private coaching." Et cetera, et cetera. And it works the same way too. Someone might be in the audience when I give a speech, and they say, "Oh, this is really cool. I want to learn more. I'm going to join your email list, and therefore I might sign up for this promotion for which I would get affiliate income," et cetera. So it becomes a flywheel of business.
So, if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that while you go deep into the thing that you do, but at the same time, instead of just focusing on one stream of income from the thing that you do, you find ways and means to add additional income stream without having to actually diversify the thing that you do. Is my understanding right?
Yeah, basically. I mean, really, it's just asking yourself the question, who else would be interested in my product or service that I'm not currently serving? And is there a way that I could tweak some variable to make it accessible to those people? And that's one question. The second question is, who are the people that already are my customers, and what else could I sell them? And if you ask those 2 questions in a strategic fashion, you can oftentimes, without too much effort, expand your empire.
Interesting. And have you seen someone actually go other than yourself, seen someone who actually started off with something and then has been able to diversify the income streams? If you can just give an example of someone you know of.
Oh, sure. I mean, basically all my friends. It's in Entrepreneurial You, I profile about 50 different entrepreneurs that have been very successful in creating multiple income streams, and it's a pretty wide variety of possibilities. But I mean, just to take one out of the many examples, just a few nights ago, I had drinks with one of the people that I profiled in the book, a woman named Selena Sue, and she started her business doing private coaching for people around PR and publicity. And that was kind of the original form of her business. But once she started to build an audience and get known in her field and attract more readers to her, she began making money in a lot of different ways. She does affiliate promotions, so that's one way that she's able to make money. She last year launched a mastermind group, so people pay her for like a year-long mastermind together. She's done a number of online courses. That's become a big revenue stream. So once you're kind of in that world, oftentimes things present themselves, and often, even better, your audience will tell you what they want. So for instance, when I started my course, which is called the Recognized Expert course in 2016, I wasn't necessarily thinking like, oh, I'm going to do live events or whatever, but the participants in the original pilot cohort of the class actually said, "Hey, we want a live event. We want to meet each other." And so I said, "Oh, okay." So I took that suggestion and I organized one. And so that became, I ran that as kind of a test, but that became a revenue stream. So I did a one-day mastermind in person in New York City in 2016. In 2017, I sort of expanded it and played with it a little bit. I turned it into a 2-day live mastermind retreat. The people there liked it so much, they said, "Hey, we would like you to create an ongoing year-long mastermind." So I did that, and I think four of the, so like 40%, 4 out of the 10 people in that room signed on for that year-long mastermind, and then I brought in other people as well, so that became a different revenue stream. But it's all because of requests from people that are already in your universe.
Interesting. So that actually gives me a nice segue. You mentioned about the recognized expert excuse me, the recognized expert program. So I read somewhere that you are the expert at how to become an expert. So, so can you, maybe, briefly talk about how does one go about becoming an expert in a particular topic? Is there a way, is there a method to the madness that you have figured out?
Yeah, there is actually. I've spent a lot of time researching it and studying it, and so I would say one of the core pieces of the methodology that I teach in the Recognized Expert course is that fundamentally there's three things you need to concentrate on, three levers that you need to push. So the first is content creation. The second is social proof. The third is your network. And so briefly, just to explain what I mean by these things, content creation is important, and the format really doesn't matter that much. It could be podcasts, it could be blogs, it could be a book, it could be speeches, but what you need to be doing is sharing your ideas publicly, because this kind of makes sense once you say it. If you do not share your ideas publicly, no one will know
No.
what they are. And therefore, it is very hard for them to consider you an expert if they have no idea what you think. So you have to do content creation. Number two is social proof. That basically means, what is your credibility, right? What indications are you giving to them that they should pay attention to you? So a quick and effective way of doing this is aligning yourself with pre-existing brands that people already recognize and respect, and therefore they can say, oh, okay, she has been vetted by this organization or that organization. She's at least worth paying attention to. I'll at least give her a chance. So social proof is critical. And then third, of course, is your network, and that is important both because you want to make sure that you're talking with smart people, so that you have good inputs, right? You want people who can say to you, oh, Mukesh, this is a great idea, go do this, or Mukesh, this is a horrible idea, definitely don't do that. So you get that, and then once you decide what you want to go on, you need people who can help you amplify that message, because there's only so much one person can do. You need help spreading it. So that is crucial there, and if you have those three pieces, that can be that's really the formula for becoming a recognized expert. And in fact, if people are interested, I have a free scored self-assessment that people can take, where you can actually rank yourself based on where you fall for each of these three categories to see where you're good and where you need to do a little bit more work. And anyone who wants it can get it for free at Dorie Clark, DorieClark.com/toolkit, TOOLKIT.
Super. So again, I'll just digress a little bit here and talk about the reinvention piece. So a lot of times what happens is, as entrepreneurs, we go ahead and start a business, take it to a scale, and then realize that this is probably not the business or the lifestyle that they would like to continue to have, which means that there are two options. Either you kind of get stuck and try to stick it out, or you reinvent yourself in a way that takes you to a kind of a business which is the kind of business that you want, which leads to a lifestyle that you want to live in as well. So which means that there is a level of reinvention that needs to happen. So you've written the book Reinvent You. So what would you tell people if they want to reinvent themselves at some point in time?
Yeah. So for reinvention, fundamentally, there's a few things you should keep in mind. The first is that this is sometimes a little alarming. It's not what people expect, but it is important to know it up front. Oftentimes, the people who will be the toughest for you to convince are the people who are close to you. We often think, oh, well, of course, my family is going to be really supportive, or my friends are going to be really supportive. And ironically, strangers are perfectly supportive because they're not invested at all. You could go up and tell some new person you meet, oh, hi, I'm Mukesh, I'm an astronaut, and they'd be like, oh, fantastic. They don't know any different. They're gonna take it at face value if you in fact have decided, yes, I'm in astronaut training school now. But your friends, your family, they're going to be the ones who will say, Mukesh, what are you thinking? What do you know about being an astronaut? Why are you giving up this good job? This doesn't make any sense. And so you really have to kind of be strong early on to withstand that, because they think they're being helpful, right? They think they're being the devil's advocate. They're saving you from making some terrible mistake. And so if you really want something, you have to be pretty persistent, and you essentially have to win them over first. This is the first battle, is convincing the people around you that you are serious about something, that you actually would do a good job with it. So this also is where content creation can become very valuable, because people might not necessarily believe that you know about something, or that you really know what you're talking about. But if you start creating a lot of content related to that, and you just keep putting it out there in a conscious and consistent fashion, after a while you kind of begin to wear them down, like, oh, well, I guess Mukesh really is passionate about being an astronaut. I had no idea. I mean, I read this piece. It sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Okay.
And so that's where the process of reinvention starts, right? So, and I think it is also important that while doing this reinvention, so how does one actually balance what he or she has been doing versus what he or she wants to do? So, is there any advice that you have for that transition period? You cannot just shut one down and then move to the other. So, there is a transition period. So, is there
Yeah.
something that you would suggest to them who are or would need to be in the transition period?
Sure. Yeah. I think oftentimes a myth that we have in our culture about entrepreneurship, or about making, professional changes of any kind, is that it needs to be this very abrupt change. Like, oh, you jump off the cliff, you just get up your courage and you do it. And oftentimes that's actually really bad advice, especially if people, you have a job, you have a mortgage, you have responsibilities, and the idea of encouraging people to just kind of wantonly quit and have faith is not great. What I suggest, on the contrary, and I talk about this a lot in Reinventing You, is that instead, the more runway you can give yourself, the better. If you say, you know what, I have decided I want to leave my job, whether it's to start a business or to shift into a different career or something like that, in a year, great. Or 2 years, even better, because it gives you time to plan strategically. It gives you time. You can save up money so that you have a little cushion for yourself. You can build skills. That's helpful. You might need to take a class. You might need to get a certificate. You might need to learn some new things. And it gives you the time to be able to do that, so that when you transition into that new thing, you're not scrambling, because you have the skills that you already need. It gives you the time to network as well, because you might say, oh gosh, if I want to move into fashion photography, gosh, I should probably meet some people in the fashion world. Well, if you have a 2-year period to do it, that's a lot of coffees, that's a lot of lunches. If you are consistent and committed, you can make that happen during that time. Whereas if you just abruptly quit, you're from the beginning, you're going to be in this high stress situation where you're just playing catch up. So I think plotting that out can be very valuable. And in fact, in Reinventing You, I tell the story about a woman named Patricia Fripp, who transitioned. She made a really interesting transition from being a hairdresser to being a professional speaker. And the way that she made this transition, she had a 10-year lease on her hair salon. And she said, you know what? That's my runway, right? I signed the contract. So what I'm going to do is take this, this 10-year period, or, however long, let's say 7 or 8 years, once she decided to be a professional speaker, I'm going to take that period, and I'm going to take all the training I can get as a professional speaker. I'm going to start out and do all the free gigs to get the exposure, get the experience. And slowly over time, she began to get paid gigs. She began to get more and more recognized. By the time the 10 years was up and she had to decide, do you renew the salon or not, she was able to just walk away from it, because she said, you know what, I don't need it anymore. She had more than replaced her income from the salon with her income as a professional speaker. So it was a completely seamless transition, because she had planned it out so well.
Interesting. So you've done so many interviews with so many people, in terms of whether it is for Entrepreneurial You, whether it is for Reinventing You, or whether it is for Standing Out. So is there a through line that you see, or is there something common which you see among people who have successfully done this transition that you can share with us? Anything that everyone seems to be doing, irrespective of what kind of transition or what kind of business they are looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a place that where it is a commonality in terms of people's success is understanding the importance of narrative. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes the biggest misconception that people have in the reinvention process is that if they just start doing it, if they just start making the transition, that other people will get it. Other people will sort of pick up on it, like, oh, obviously, Mukesh, you're becoming an astronaut. Clearly, that makes all the sense in the world. We would like it, of course, if that was the case. But the truth is, number one, most people are not paying that much attention to us. They're not clued in. They're busy with their other things. Number two, even if they are not going to expend a lot of cognitive energy to try to figure out our motivations or our rationale for doing something. And so so first of all, they might not even notice that you're making a transition. They just, whatever, miss it. Number two, even if they do see it, they're not going to think, oh, wow, gosh, what is it in Mukesh's past that leads him to want to do this now? Like, that's just like way too much effort. What they're going to say instead is like, oh, Mukesh, was, he did, like, are you in tech or what do you do now?
Yeah, I work for SAP.
Fantastic. So Mukesh was at SAP. Now he wants to be an astronaut. That's weird. Mukesh must be having a midlife crisis. Like, that's basically, what most people, they're like, I don't know. And so whatever explanation people come up with for your transition, it's usually not the right one. It's usually not a favorable one. It's just like, And so if we want people to really understand why we're doing what we're doing, and if we want them to understand, more importantly, why it is that we are qualified to make this transition, why it is that actually it's not random, the things that we did in the past prepare us well for the thing that we want to do in the future, we have to be on it. We have to be on top of telling that story and explaining it to people. Because if we tell the story right, oh, well, I used to do this, now I want to do this, and here's how these dots connect, great. 99 times out of 100, the person's not going to argue. They're not going to be like, that doesn't make sense. They're going to be like, oh, cool. And then that's in their head. Then they can be the ambassador and repeat that to other people. But they're not going to come up with it on their own. So you have to be very, very assiduous about making sure that you are sharing that narrative with people, that you have developed it and are putting it out there in a cogent way so that other people can take it on.
Interesting. And that's the brand that you're building for yourself.
Exactly, yes.
And a lot of times I found that people are not very very good at coming up with this kind of a narrative for themselves. I mean, you ask someone to help me. Let's say, for example, I have an entrepreneurial friend who's running a business. If I go and ask him, can you help me come up with my narrative? He might be able to do that for me. But whereas if I ask him, what is your narrative? People tend to struggle quite a bit. So is this something that you found in others as well, or is this just a phenomena that I have found locally here amongst my friends?
No, I think it's pretty universal. I mean, the problem, of course, is that we don't have enough perspective on ourselves, right? If you are in your head 24 hours a day, which we are as people, you simply know too much information about yourself, and it is very hard to separate the signal from the noise to be able to create a coherent narrative that is something that weighs things appropriately and puts them in an order that actually makes sense to other people. You need other folks to be able to just cut through it and say, Mukesh, this doesn't matter, here's what matters. And so this is why it's so important to have a trusted group of colleagues or friends around you who can do this, because it's almost impossible to do it for ourselves. I mean, no matter how smart you are or whatever, I mean, you can come up with hypotheses, you can sort of start the process, but if you really want it to be good or make sense, then I would say having other people be be part of that process is important. For instance, in Reinventing You, I have an exercise that I share with people, which I call the 3-word exercise, and it's very simple, but kind of quick and dirty, effective. And the way that it works is that over the course of a few days, a week, whatever, you go to about half a dozen friends or colleagues and you ask them a very simple question, which is, if you had to describe me in only 3 words, what would they be? And you write them down so you don't forget, but guaranteed by the time you get to the 4th or the 5th person, you are going to see commonalities in what they say. And the issue is, it's not that they're going to tell you things that, oh my God, you've never heard in your entire life, right? I mean, almost always it's going to be familiar, but the part that is so useful and the part that we cannot do on our own is they are essentially telling you, what is it that from an outside perspective other people think is most unique about you? That is something that we have no perspective on. We have no idea. And so knowing that becomes very valuable because it begins to give you clues about strengths that you have in comparison to other people in the marketplace that you can really drill down on if you want.
Very interesting. So that brings me to a slightly, a different question, which is having written this book, Entrepreneurially You, you said that you interviewed 50 plus people for the book. So, is there anything that really surprised you in the entire process of having spoken to so many different people? And if so, what was that?
Well, one of the things that I actually found pretty surprising, and it's not shocking. What's surprising about it is that it seems in some ways very elementary and yet so stunningly effective, is the power of consistency. And what I mean by that is, one of the people that I interviewed in Entrepreneurial You is a guy named James Clear, who is a popular blogger about habits and about fitness.
I follow him as well, so great guy.
There we go. Yeah. So when I interviewed James, I mean, he's built this massive email list of multiple hundreds of thousands of people. When I talked to him, I think it was about 400,000, his email list. And I asked him, of course, well, how did you build that? What did that process look like? And he said, literally the only difference between him and other people was that at a certain point in I think late 2012, he decided that he was going to blog every Monday and every Thursday. And he just announced it. He's like, every Monday and Thursday, that's what I'm doing. And so he kept to it religiously. He actually, in the course of writing his book recently, he announced he sort of had fallen off the wagon a little bit with that. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But during the time that I interviewed him, he had this meteoric rise in his email list. And he said that really it was a function of the consistency, not just because people came to know, oh, good, I get 2 blogs per week from James, but also he said that consistency makes it far more likely, just like a baseball player or cricket player or something at bat. Inevitably, some of the posts are going to be average, the majority. Some of them are going to be not that great, and some of them are going to be amazing. They're going to be blockbusters. They're going to be the ones that go viral. And it's very hard. Of course, if we could say, oh well, every post I write is going to be a viral post, then sure, why would you do anything else? But we can't do that. No one knows how to do that. And so the only way to get more viral posts that really explode is to have more at-bats. And so that consistency, that was a forcing function for him, that at least 8 times a month, he was going to be creating a post which had a chance of really being a breakthrough hit. So I think that's something that I thought was very powerful.
Super. So you were recently announced to be part of the Marshall Goldsmith's team of people whom he will coach and share all his knowledge so far. So how did that come out? Congratulations, first of all. And
thank you.
How excited are you to be a part of the team? And did you already attend the first workshop that he put out some time back?
Yes. So I joined it was recently announced, but I joined the MG 100, the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches Program, last July. And so I so far have attended a couple of programs that he put on, one in New York City in October, one in DC in December, and there's another one coming up in next month, and it's been a great experience. I actually got involved in it through a good friend of mine named Alyssa Cohn, who is a very successful executive coach in the startup space, and she has been a mentee of Marshall's for many years, and so she got me involved in the program. But it's been great. I mean, Marshall, of course, has a talent for really bringing together an amazing crew of people, and he's creating this from such a generous place. I mean, this is not any kind of a money making initiative or whatever. He's doing it just because he wants to share his knowledge and create something good. Create a community of people who are better at what they do. He wants to raise everyone's game, and then his own what he says again and again is his only request is that at some point and in some fashion that all of us do something similar. I mean, if not create our own 100 coaches, at least in some way create a format for giving back and sharing knowledge with others. And so I think that's a pretty cool goal and a testament to his generosity.
So, having attended those two, three workshops already, is there anything that you've already learned which you see changing the way you look at things, or having an impact on how you run your business as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in these early sessions that I've gone to, in many ways it's more even just about meeting the other participants and getting to be enmeshed in the community. But the first session that I went to really was kind of a breakdown of Marshall's key methodology. And so something that I like a lot, actually, he has a famous concept called feed forward. And I think it's very apt in the sense that feedback, I mean, that's of course the classic, oh, let me give you some feedback. And almost like whenever you hear that phrase, it's like, oh no, let me give you some feedback, Mukesh. Let me tell you what you did wrong here. And it's just like, almost nobody responds well to that. It's just like, you know what? I can't do anything about it now. Like, what do you want me to do? And so it's often not helpful, and it just engenders ill will. It kind of gets people defensive. But feed forward is kind of a nicer framing of that, because it's people asking for help moving forward, where they actually can do something about it. What can you do in the future? What are your ideas for me? And that kind of sets a better frame. It's less about criticizing you and more about collectively coming up with the best ideas for the future. And so I think that's a very nice adaptation.
Super. So, I'll just again shift conversation to the fact that you yourself are an entrepreneur as well. So there comes a time in every entrepreneur's life where everything that they do seems to do nothing to their business. They feel that their backs to the walls. They are at a place where nothing seems to be working. So have you been in a position like that? And if yes, how did you come out of that position?
Yeah. I mean, it's true. One of the challenges about entrepreneurship is that, of course, you don't have a guaranteed salary, right? You're paying your salary, and I think what I've come to learn. Of course, I learned it. I had both the benefit and the misfortune of learning it early on, because I had a day job, my first job out of graduate school, as a reporter, which I was laid off from. And so it's kind of like you think you have this steady income until you don't, and then you have zero income, which is a little alarming. At least when you're an entrepreneur, you're sort of aware that it's going to be very precarious, that there are going to be peaks and valleys and things like that. But I certainly have had some valleys. In fact, one that stands out was just before the release of Reinventing You. For some reason, and that was my first book that came out in 2013, and for some reason, which I can't put my finger on. I don't know that there was a reason. I think it was maybe just a constellation of different potential clients, and they all had their own thing. Like some of them wanted to delay a project, and some of them whatever. It was just a million different reasons, but it led to me for a period of about 6 months having almost no new work. I was doing some stuff that I had been doing, but normally you get these sort of streams of requests or incoming inquiries, and there was just nothing. And it was like kind of alarming. It's like, wait a minute, what's happening? Is something going wrong? And I was alarmed about it. And I never got to the point where it was like, oh man, I need to get a job tomorrow, but it was concerning to me. And so the hope that I had, I was like, okay, I have this book coming out, and my hope was that the book would trigger enough interest, enough publicity or enough kind of brand awareness about me that it would kick open some new projects and some new opportunities. And it turned out that it did, which was great. And since then I've been fortunate that I haven't had a sort of dry spell like that, but you do have to kind of take it on faith a little bit. And that was a scary time. I think that for me, what has been key is that as an entrepreneur, I always like to try to, especially in the early days of my business, but even now, I try to live below my means so that I can stockpile a lot of, liquid reserves, cash reserves, because you just, you don't have a guarantee of what's going to happen or when business is going to come in. And so what gives you freedom is knowing that you are not in an urgent state of affairs, that you can make choices because you have a cushion.
So the other thing that almost all entrepreneurs need, and at some point in time realize that they are already late having is mentors. Right. So at every point in time, depending upon the phase of entrepreneurship that you are in, either you are in the phase of building an enterprise, or you're in the phase of scaling an enterprise, or you're in the phase of stabilizing and looking at the next possible opportunity for growth, you need a different set of mentors who can actually guide you. So number one question is, have you had the luxury of having such mentors? Number two, is there a thought process, or is there a way that someone can actually go about identifying some of these mentors? Because a lot of times people come back and ask me, my audience comes back and asks me is, how do I find out whether a particular person is a good mentor for me, or where do I find someone who can actually help me in this phase of my entrepreneurship?
Yeah. So I've written about this quite a lot, and thought about it quite a lot. I have kind of a philosophy around it, which is that I think that in a lot of ways the discourse around mentorship is a little bit misguided, in that so much of the conversation is about having a mentor who is essentially, you're like the mini me of that mentor. They're doing the same thing as you. They're a little bit older, maybe they're like 10 years older in their career, and they decide magnanimously, oh, you have so much potential. Let me just mentor you. Let me just do this thing for you. And of course, it would be wonderful if that was the case, but essentially, it is a wish in that form to be rescued by a fairy godmother. That's basically what it is. And if you have one, great. I am very excited for your fairy godmother, but most of us do not. And so instead, we have to get a little bit more proactive about making our own. And so what has worked for me, and what I will suggest to other people, is what I call having a mentor board of directors. So it's not necessarily just relying on one person to be everything to us, but instead assembling a group of people around us, and they could be senior to us, they also could be peers, they also might even be junior to us, but they're people who have skills or abilities or character traits that you really respect and that you want to learn from. And you don't have to, emulate them in every way, but you can say, oh, I'd really like to learn that thing from that person, and just try to spend a little bit more time with them and learn how they do it, learn, sort of soak it in. And if we can be conscious about creating that, I think that can be very valuable. And in my case, I've had the opportunity on a number of occasions to learn from, I'd say, peer mentors. My good friend Jenny Blake, who certainly qualifies in that category, she has a word that she coined called a friend-tor, which I like very much. And so, for instance, sometimes it's kind of mastermind group. My good friend Mike McAllowitz created something a couple of years ago called the Speakers Exchange.
So he's been on the show a couple of times, actually.
Fantastic. Well, you see, you were already on top of it. But yeah, he had a group called the Speakers Exchange, where it's kind of a network of speakers, which I learned a lot from and made a lot of good friends from. So things like that.
Super. So I think Jenny Blake, she agreed to be on the show. We just need to find a date that works for both of us. So
good.
This is a small world.
Yes.
So that brings probably, to the last set of questions, because we are running out of time. So one question is that, outside of your own book and your own work that you've done, is there any other resource? And it could be a book, it could be a documentary, it could be anything else that you think which will help my audience, which you want them to check out.
Yeah, I'm actually so. I was mentioning earlier that I'm running this mastermind group, and I just yesterday sent out a new assignment for people in my mastermind. And what it was, and so I'll share this with your listeners as well, is I just finished reading the book The Power of Moments by Dan and Chip Heath, which I thought was quite good. And I thought that was a really interesting book. And, in some ways it may have applications to your business. For other people, it may just have applications to your life. But I think the question of how do you take your time, the sort of raw time that we all have, and use it consciously to create more special moments and special memories is a worthy question to be asking, whether you're talking about your spouse, your family, or your clients. So I think that's a good one to read and to think about.
Yeah, it was an amazing book. I had the opportunity to read the book as well, and I think some of the things that the Heath brothers talk about in the book, whether it is a new employee experience, whether it is how do you ensure that you turn a normal, simple moment into a moment which you will remember for life. That's really, really powerful. The book they talk about. So I'm a big fan of theirs. I think their books are the ones which I have gifted the most. I mean, I've gifted Decisive to all my customers. I've gifted Switch to all my customers. I've gifted Made to Stick to all my customers. And now this year, every year, Jan, Feb is when I buy gifts for my customers. And this year, it's going to be The Power of Moments. The other book
Nice.
that I found, which is also very similar, is a book by Dan Pink. It's called When. Also talks
Yes.
about moments, but in a very different way. And put together these two books, I think if we are able to gain insights from both these books and apply them to our lives, I think they can make a significant difference, not just in our lives, but in lives of everyone else that we are connected with. So thanks for bringing that out. So the next question that I have for you is, if there is one thing that you think has had the most or the biggest impact on your business, what is that one thing?
One thing, I think honestly, it's just that I'm very persistent, and I will try things many times before giving up. I mean, in fact, I pretty much won't give up, and so I don't get too stressed out if I'm getting a no, I mean, I'm not talking about like getting a particular client to convert or something, like you don't want to be some harasser, but if, for instance, like you're trying to break into a publication or something like that, then it's just like, that's cool, not right now, but later. So, I think it's sometimes people think about, it's so hard to not get discouraged or something like that. But if you take a very, very long-term view about, it's going to happen eventually, then you don't have to be so stressed out about it not happening in a particular moment.
Interesting. So I remember reading somewhere that Clay Christensen always had this thing that he wants to become the editor of Wall Street Journal, and he's still waiting for that opportunity to come by.
There we go.
30 years now. Anyway, so so, and I think being an entrepreneur is also being a little bit stubborn and persistent, because otherwise you don't get what you really want as well. So that again, is a trait that most of my listeners share as well. So the show is called Pushing Beyond the Obvious. So what is it that is so obvious to you but people miss all the time?
Well, I think something that comes to mind, Mukesh, is that I give a lot of talks about networking. I did an ebook called Standout Networking, and in my own life, it's kind of an important thing, because I regularly do these like dinner gatherings. I moved to New York about 4 years ago, and when I moved here, I pretty much didn't. I mean, I knew people, right? But I didn't have any close friends. So I sort of had to reconstruct my friend network from the ground up. And so having dinner gatherings was a way to do that. And it really made me understand that I think a lot of people have kind of baggage around networking, because they assume that networking means like networking events, which are almost always horrible. And I think that what is obvious that people miss is that essentially networking is really just making friends. That's basically all it is, and it's fun to make friends. And I think that people they put all this weight, this baggage on it, which makes it not fun. But if you can just treat it like, hey, let's go make some friends, let's go meet some cool people, then it becomes like a really nice thing to do.
Yeah, and not necessarily keeping a particular result in mind when you are trying to do that. I've seen that as long as you are just open to meeting people and getting to know them, it is easy. But the moment you say, okay, which one of these can become my client, or which one of these can actually help me out in getting a new job or in getting a new client, that is when it becomes really, really stressful, and people don't really like it. And it also comes through when you talk to other people that you have a hidden agenda behind your approach, and that kind of doesn't work. So anything else that you would like my audience to go check out as soon as they listen to this conversation and they're done?
Nice. Well, one thing that I will mention, in case folks are interested in when we were talking earlier about how to create multiple streams of income in your business, I have a free resource that relates specifically to that. It's called the 88-question Entrepreneurial You self-assessment, and so it actually walks people through how to think about creating multiple income streams in their own business. And if anybody would like to get that, you can download it for free at dorieclark.com/entrepreneur.
Super. And where can people reach you, and where can people find the work that you've done, the books that you've written?
Yeah, thank you. So the books are Reinventing You, Standout, and Entrepreneurial You. Pretty sure they're on Amazon. You could get them at Amazon India too. They might even be on Flipkart. We'll have to check that. I know that's the cool thing in India, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, if anyone wants to learn more about me or read a bunch of free articles, 500 free articles on my website, just go to dorieclark.com.
Super. It was a pleasure talking to you, Dorie, and thanks for taking time.
Thank you, Mukesh. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pushing Beyond the Obvious. If you like the show and would like to support, please head over to iTunes or wherever you are listening to this show and rate us and write a review. Till next time, have fun.